Aliens called tears a sign of fragility, until one human made them howl. Aboard the orbital platform circling Jupiter, the Alvari gathered with their analytical instruments, cold lenses pulsing as they examined the lone human before them. For decades they had catalogued emotions, reducing them to messy chemical storms that muddled reasoning. They produced treatises on laughter, tomes on grief, and charts that folded anger into tidy formulas. Their papers declared feeling primitive interference, unworthy of advanced minds. Still, curiosity drove them to seize Ward, a communications officer from the Terran Navy, the first human hauled into their antiseptic chamber of light. They expected obedience, tremor, perhaps collapse. They did not expect her to turn the very thing they scorned into a weapon keener than any blade. They began with sorrow. The room dimmed. Projections of Earth's seas washed the walls and then burned away into images of ruin. They anticipated Alara would weep, crumble into helpless sobs. Instead she laughed, not cruelly, but with a fragile, almost rueful sound that unsettled them. The more they escalated the visuals, the planet cracking, cities collapsing, the more she shook her head and murmured, "You don't understand. You cannot simulate loss unless you have loved it first." The monitors jittered. The Alvari exchanged baffled signals as their instruments failed to quantify the strange power rising in her voice. When they switched to anger, circling her with holograms of alien soldiers slaughtering children, she did not rage or lash out. She fixed them with a steady, glistening gaze, hands controlled. "Rage is not wildfire," she said softly. "It is fuel. It makes us fight smarter, not fall apart." Her pulse climbed in rhythms they had never recorded, surging, dipping like tides before a storm. Nervous electrical chatter passed between them. Something was slipping beyond their control. The final test was joy, the one they thought easiest to manipulate. They flooded her with staged gatherings, canned laughter, synthetic smiles arranged to force a response. She closed her eyes and summoned a memory they could not fabricate. The first time her brother returned from deployment, the embrace, the scent of salt and pine, the unmistakable fact of love no alien projection could mimic. She began to hum. The sound was unplanned, a human melody, an old sea shanty her mother had sung, and it filled the chamber with vibrations outside the Alvari catalogue. Their sensors screamed as the hum grew, humming through the metal bones of the room. The aliens clutched their cranial frills. Composure cracked. "What is this frequency?" one demanded, staggering. Alara opened her eyes and smiled. "It's not a frequency. It's us." Panic rippled through the council. For decades they had measured emotion as static noise. Now it had become a weaponized resonance, not because she intended violence, but because her voice carried something their biology had no counter for: authenticity. They had dissected feeling like anatomy. She conducted it like an orchestra. The walls vibrated, instruments failed, and she hummed on with tears streaming. No weakness but force. Tears glinted in artificial light, each drop striking the sterile floor like sparks on steel. The aliens staggered back, clutching themselves as if the sound were tearing them apart. They had catalogued terror, but they had never felt it, until that instant. One collapsed, frills twitching. Another uttered a broken, unfamiliar cry. Bound to the chair, she tilted her head and whispered, "You thought you understood us. But emotion is not data. It is fire and storm and wide sky. It can undo, and it can also make us unbreakable." Deep in the station, alarms began to wail as systems logged cascading failures. Her hum had infected more than minds. It crept into the infrastructure, scrambling circuits as if the machines themselves sensed something beyond calculus. Guards paused outside the chamber, weapons raised but hands trembling. They had studied humans as fragile, too enslaved to feeling to rival Alvari efficiency. Yet here sat one human woman, shackled and still commanding the room, while their fingers shook on triggers. She stopped humming and let the silence fall heavy. The quiet was worse. The aliens lay gasping, bodies convulsing with aftershocks of an emotion they could not name. She leaned forward, chains rattling. "Do you know what fear really is?" she asked. It isn't what your projections made you believe. It's realizing you underestimated the wrong species. Lights flickered. Structural plates groaned. For the first time in their long history, the Alvari felt a truth they had denied. Humans did not merely endure emotions. They could forge them into instruments. Once released, no calculus could bind the storm. The chamber remained hushed except for the rasping breaths of the Alvari, their muscles seizing in patterns they could not control. Guards glanced at one another, trying to summon drilled discipline, but training faltered beneath the weight of what they'd witnessed. Alara's eyes swept the room, cataloging their fear, their bewilderment, their failure to classify the event. She knew this was only the opening move. The station trembled again, but this time the shake came not only from her humming. Somewhere deep, the resonance she had awakened threaded into the facility's systems, finding channels through their machines. Lights pulsed in time with the lingering cadence of her song, throwing the aliens into stuttering shadows. A technician lunged to recalibrate the sensor arrays. When his fingers brushed the console, the panel arced and threw him back with a cry. "It's contaminating the grid," one choked, clutching throat frills as if the air had turned to glass. "The signal, it's alive." She tilted her head. They had thought they were experimenting on her. In truth, their hubris had opened their entire station to something they could not contain. Human emotion was not noise. Not a chemical remnant but energy. Able to ride currents, able to seep into circuits. Never meant to feel. She leaned back in the restraints, her tone steady. "You thought yourselves immune. You believed emotions were chains. But you built your towers of logic too tall. When something won't fit your definitions, it breaks you." Their leader, draped in crystal robes, staggered. "This is impossible. No order can emerge from such chaos." "Chaos," Alara breathed, her voice echoing. "Chaos births life. You can't sterilize it." The leader lurched forward, hand raised to the guards. "Bind her tighter. Cut the neural cords. Stop the resonance." The guards obeyed sluggishly, their limbs jerking like puppets on frayed strings. Alara did not resist. She closed her eyes, inhaled. And with each exhale the walls dimmed, as if the station itself bent toward her rhythm. The guards froze. One dropped his weapon. Another clamped hands to his ears. Her breathing grew louder than alarms. A voiceless pulse threading into their skulls. But it wasn't only in their minds. Across the station, comm relays caught fragments of her voice, transmitting them as background noise. Static shifted into melody. Pilots in docking bays heard human tones, bleeding into comms. In laboratories, researchers stared at monitors pulsing, with alien songs they'd never known. Even the reactor's currents bent, patterns threading into its core. Alara opened her eyes, her voice firmer. "You study emotions because you've never had them. But you made a mistake. They aren't private. They spread. And now your station is infected." A ceiling panel cracked, shards scattering. Aliens shrieked as sparks rained down. The leader's voice split with fury. "End this now." He charged, robe fracturing as his body convulsed. Under feelings he had no names for. Alara met his gaze, whisper sharp as steel. "You're feeling fear for the first time. That's why you can't think." The leader faltered, knees buckling. His guards backed away, afraid to touch him. Chaos bloomed across the station. Docking crews panicked as doors refused to open, humming instead with her rhythm. Scientists collapsed, vision blurred by tears. They did not understand. Soldiers turned on each other, anger spreading like flame. On the observation deck, an alien clawed at glass, screaming that the stars themselves were laughing. Alara felt it all, the tide of emotions surging outward, growing stronger as more succumbed. But she was not done. They had dissected sorrow, rage, joy, isolation, as if feelings were separate creatures. They never realized humans could braid them into one. She recalled her brother's embrace, the grief of his loss, the laughter they shared, the fury of his endangerment. She wove it all together, releasing it as a storm. The hum rose again into song layered. Sorrow carving the lows, rage sharpening edges, joy lifting highs. It filled the chamber, like fire clashing with water, a force both ruin and renewal. The aliens screamed. Their leader clutched his chest, as though a new organ had awoken inside. Systems across the station buckled, yet the resonance spread carried into transmissions leaking into space. Human fleets on patrol caught strange signals, her song laced within, distorted but unmistakable. Terran captains froze as her voice reached them. This is Ward. They thought they could measure us. Now they know they can't. The message cut through alien jammers, echoing across ships already bracing for war. For the first time, emotion itself had entered the battlefield. On the station, the Alvari convulsed, their pristine empire unraveling, not under steel but under feelings they had never dared to touch. And Alara, bound in chains, sat at the center of the storm, eyes alight with a fire born, not of reason but of something the Alvari could never fathom. The orbital platform shuddered, as her song consumed every corridor, every circuit, every mind. Aliens staggered through their halls, elegance shattered into frantic scrambles, perfect tones broken into sobs and wails. Fear, grief, fury, hope, each wave struck harder. Their leader crawled to her, robe torn, voice breaking into fragments. "Stop, we cannot endure this." His words dissolved into a sob, an emotion unknown to him hours before. Alara sat unmoved, wrists chained, but the true bonds were gone. Her voice, her memory, her storm had already spilled beyond the physical, and nothing could stop it, turning the entire station into a vast resonant chamber. She looked down at the leader shaking before her, then raised her gaze to the guards whose hands could no longer lift their weapons. "You studied us like insects in a jar," she said. "But you forgot one truth. Emotions connect us. They are not flaws. They are strength." With that she tore her wrist free. The restraints groaned, weakened by the station's trembling frame, and split apart. Rising tall, she let her voice deepen, layering sorrow and joy until the walls themselves vibrated with her presence. The aliens collapsed, unable to stand as resonance fractured their logic-born control. Systems overloaded. The hum of the central reactor began syncing with her cadence. She could feel the machine becoming part of the storm, the resonance embedding itself into its core. Across the void, human ships caught the signal. The Terran fleet, once cautious, surged with unity. Commanders felt her words thrum in their bones. Soldiers clenched fists with resolve. Pilots steadied their hands, no longer afraid. Alara had not only broken the aliens, she had ignited her people. When the Terran fleet entered orbit, they met not organized resistance, but a fortress cracking under emotions could not contain. Alien ships scrambled, their formations crumbling as captains wept uncontrollably or raged without aim. Humans struck with precision, every shot guided not just by strategy, but by conviction carried in her song. Explosions lit the void as Alvari vessels tore apart, their sterile perfection fractured. Their discipline could not withstand the storm of the species they had scorned. Inside, the leader crawled toward her again, eyes blurred with tears. "What are you?" Alara stepped closer, her presence like sunlight breaking into a frozen cavern. "I'm human," she said softly. "And this is what that means." With a final surge, she sent the storm pouring into the reactor. The chamber glowed, aurora-colored waves ripping through the walls. The aliens screamed, clutching their heads. As she walked calmly toward the exit, the door parted for her, systems bending, as though recognizing a master. Bare feet echoed along the trembling corridor. Behind her, the reactor collapsed. A controlled implosion that sent shock waves tearing through the fortress. From orbit, humans watched the station shatter into shards of flame and light, scattering across Jupiter's dark horizon. The Terran fleet withdrew, carrying survivors of the clash. But the message was already carved in history. The Alvari, who believed themselves immune to the chaos of feeling, had been defeated not by steel or firepower, but by what they dismissed as weakness. Alara stood now at the viewport of a Terran vessel, her reflection blurring against streaming stars. Officers passed behind, whispering of her, the woman whose voice brought down a fortress. She pressed her hands to the glass, her voice quiet but still powerful. They thought emotion was noise, she murmured. But it's music. And music can move the universe. Across the fleet, her words carried. Soldiers repeated her name, her phrases. The legend spread faster than wreckage from the alien citadel. Humanity had gained more than victory. They had discovered a truth, that their greatest strength lay not in steel or engines, but in the storms of the heart. In laughter, in grief, in fury, in joy. In the bonds that made them unbreakable. That day the Alvari learned fear. But humanity learned something greater. That no equation could cage what made them who they were.